Here's everything you need to know so far about the Jeffrey Epstein list that have just been released. First of all, there's no list. It's just dozens of documents that are going to be released, and there is about 40 of them that have so far been released to the public. There has been a rumor about a client list of Jeffrey Epstein's that was going to be released. There isn't one. These are just documents that have been released from one of the trials, one of the lawsuits that his accusers had against him in 2015. There is about 40 documents right now that have been released, and they had about 250 or so names on them. But some of those names we already knew. Some of those are employees of Epstein's. Some of them are witnesses that took the stand, and some of them are victims. Before we get into the list and what you need to know, just in case you aren't sure who Jeffrey Epstein is, basically he's a millionaire who hung out with famous people. Celebrities, politicians, you name it, he was hanging out with them. He was first arrested in Palm Beach in 2005 for paying a 14-year-old for inappropriate things. After his arrest, there were dozens of underage girls that came forward saying that he basically had them do the same thing. However, for some reason, in 2008, he was allowed to plead guilty to just one count, one victim of what was going on. He pled guilty and he only got 13 months. And basically, it ended up being like a jail work release program. After his conviction, a lot of his famous friends cut ties with him completely, but a lot of them didn't. Some of his more famous friends that supposedly said they cut ties was Donald Trump and also Bill Clinton. Years later, the Miami Herald started reporting on this scandal again, and it piqued the interest of some federal prosecutors in New York who ended up charging him for sex trafficking in 2019. Jeffrey Epstein ended his life in prison while waiting for trial, and prosecutors went after his girlfriend, Ghislaine Maxwell, for helping to recruit all of these underage women. In 2021, she was sentenced to 20 years in prison. In 2015, one of his victims ended up taking him to court. She was suing him for what he had done to her, and those are the documents that are now being released. Her name was Virginia, and when she was 17 years old, she was working at Trump's Mar-a-Lago spa, and she was basically lured away by Jeffrey Epstein, and he wanted her to be his personal masseuse. She ended up being made to do a lot more than just massages, and this also included a lot of Jeffrey Epstein's famous friends, including Prince Andrew. Now, Prince Andrew has always denied this. However, he did settle a lawsuit with this woman in 2022. Okay, now let's get into these documents. So there are a lot of names mentioned in these 40 documents. However, they are all mentioned in different contexts, and it does not so much mean that they had any wrongdoings. So Trump's name was mentioned 3 or 4 times in these documents. However, it's basically just in passing, like saying they were going to land and go to one of Trump's casinos. Bill Clinton is also mentioned in this. Again, he's not being charged with any wrongdoings, but it is mentioned that apparently Epstein commented to one of the victims that Bill Clinton likes them young, referring to his women. Michael Jackson's name is mentioned in these documents. Apparently, one of the victims was asked if they had met anyone famous while with Jeffrey Epstein, and they replied, Michael Jackson. David Copperfield is also in these documents. Apparently, one of the victims told a story where she was having dinner and David Copperfield was there. At one point, he apparently asked her if she was aware that girls were being paid to recruit other girls. Alan Dershowitz is actually mentioned a few times in these documents. Now, he is denying everything that is said, but employees testified that he was at Epstein's home often and that he also got massages and was there with young women. Bill Richardson, the former governor of New Mexico, passed away in September, but he is also mentioned in these documents as having visited Epstein's ranch in New Mexico. Jean-Luc Brunel was a good friend of Epstein's. He was also mentioned in these documents. He apparently was a French modeling agent, and he was actually awaiting trial in Paris for things that he had done to underage women, and he killed himself just last year. That's basically all we know right now from these documents, but there are expected to be more documents released. I will definitely be following this case, so hit follow if you're interested.